Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt for Remnant TV. Over at remnantnewspaper.com, we're very pleased to release Archbishop Carlo Maria Viganò's latest missive, this time confronting the Pope's devious strategy to, as papal advisor, Archbishop Victor Fernández put it some years ago, back in 2015, to bring about reform that is irreversible and that cannot be undone by future popes. This latest masterful deception on part of the Vatican will see to it that Cardinals made now in the image and likeness of Pope Francis will exercise unbelievable power and influence and control over the next conclave. So as former papal nuncio to the United States of America, Archbishop Viganò is in a position to know the players, the past cover-ups, and the entire modus operandi, if you will, behind this Machiavellian coup d'église that we're all watching. And we're confident that the Vatican has considerable cause for concern over this really damaging testimony offered by Archbishop Viganò. And of course, we here at the Remnant stand solidly behind Archbishop Viganò. And this is his latest letter on behalf of all of us, really, the Catholic faithful, who Archbishop Viganò insists to the Pope, to the Vatican, he insists that we all have a right to know the truth. So this, again, is the latest from Archbishop Viganò. Archbishop Viganò to Pope Francis, the faithful have a right to know. We have just been through one of the most disgraceful episodes in which we have seen the Prince of Lies at work to discredit the book of Pope Benedict XVI and Cardinal Robert Sarah by covering them with vile insults and vulgar insinuations, and the Pope's jailer, as a Judas, now also acting as a hitman. And now, once again, we find ourselves dealing with another masterpiece of deception, the confirmation by the Pope of the elections of the new Dean and Vice Dean of the College of Cardinals by the Cardinal Bishops. This has gone almost unnoticed, and yet conceals a devious strategy. It should be borne in mind, in fact, that in June 2018, Pope Francis increased the number of cardinal bishops, which had remained unchanged for centuries, promoting 4 new ones in one fell swoop. In this way, he secured a majority in favor of him, as he has always done with the creation of new members of the College of Cardinals. To Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re, appointed Dean of the College at the age of 86 and therefore excluded from the next conclave, I wish an even longer life than that of his father. But his appointment is a cover for yet another, more effective appointment of Cardinal Sandri, which has been prepared ad hoc to pilot the next conclave, Secundum Franciscum, that is, according to an updated and augmented edition of the St. Gallen Mafia. I have a long-standing friendship with Cardinal Sandri that dates back to the time shared in the Pontifical Ecclesiastical Academy, then during 11 years in the same office as secretaries to 3 substitutes of the Secretariat of State, and then 7 years of collaboration once he was appointed substitute for General Affairs in the Secretary of State, having returned after just 6 months from a mission as nuncio in Mexico. Plato is my friend, but truth is a much better friend. This maxim, attributed to Aristotle, then taken up by Plato toward Socrates, and later by Cicero, is explained by St. Thomas Aquinas in Sententia Libri Ethicorum, Liber 1, Lectio 6. Quote, that truth should be preferred to friends, he proves in this way. He is the greater friend for whom we ought to have the greater consideration. Although we should have friendship for both truth and our fellow man, we ought rather to love truth because we should love our fellow man especially on account of truth and virtue. Now truth is a most excellent friend, of the sort to whom the homage of honor is due. Besides, truth is a divine thing, for it is found first and chiefly in God. He concludes, therefore, that it is virtuous to honor truth above friends. End quote. And this is why what I'm about to write concerning Cardinal Leonardo Sandri is inspired solely by the friendship that has bound him to me for almost 50 years, for the good of his soul, for the love of truth, who is Christ himself, and for the Church, his bride, whom we served together. In the first audience that Francis granted me, after the one on June 23, 2013, that I have already mentioned in my first testimony, in which he asked me about Cardinal Maciel, he asked me also a similar question: what is Cardinal Sandri like? Caught by surprise by the question about a dear friend of mine, and feeling put upon the spot, I did not answer. Then Francis, joining his hands in a characteristically Italian gesture, waved them back and forth, as if to say that Sandri knows how to get by. And then he looked at me. He looked me in the eyes, seeking my consent to this suggestion. So I told him in confidence, "Holy Father, I don't know if you are aware that Nuncio Justo Muyor, president of the Pontifical Ecclesiastical Academy, was removed from the Apostolic Nunciature in Mexico because he opposed the directives coming from the Secretariat of State to cover up the very serious accusations against Maciel." This is what I told the Pope, so that he would take it into account and eventually remedy the injustice that Archbishop Muyor had suffered for not compromising himself, for remaining faithful to the truth, and for the love of the Church. I reaffirm this truth here, so as to honor this faithful servant of the Holy See, on whose tomb, in the Cathedral of Almira, Spain, I celebrated a Holy Mass of suffrage. I also wrote in my first testimony that the person chiefly responsible for covering up the misdeeds committed by Maciel was then Secretary of State Cardinal Angelo Sodano, whose recent acceptance to resign as Dean of the College of Cardinals was linked to his involvement in the Maciel affair. He, in addition to protecting Maciel, is certainly no stranger to McCarrick's promotions. Meanwhile, Cardinal Francis Arinze deserves to be recognized for having opposed within the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith Sodano's attempt to cover up the Maciel case. Unfortunately for him, Sandri also allowed himself to be involved by Sodano in this operation to cover up Maciel's horrible misdeeds. To replace Archbishop Muyor in Mexico City, it was necessary to appoint a person of unfailing loyalty to Sodano. Sandri had already given proof of this as assessor for the section of General Affairs in the Secretariat of State. Serving at the time as nuncio of Venezuela for just a little over 2 years, he was transferred to Mexico. I was a direct witness to these shady maneuvers, which those in charge would describe as normal personal transfers. I was a direct witness through conversations that they had had on January 25, 2000, the feast of the conversion of St. Paul, while we were on our way to the basilica that bears his name for the closing of the week of prayer for Christian unity. The chain linking the dates of these transfers is very significant. On January 19, 2000, Archbishop Giorgio Zur, who had been president of the Pontifical Ecclesiastical Academy, the PAE, for only 1 year, was transferred to Moscow. On February 11, 2000, Archbishop Justo Muyor, who at this point had been in Mexico for just 2.5 years, was appointed president of the PAE. On March 1, 2000, Archbishop Sandri was transferred to Mexico after spending only 2.5 years in Venezuela. Just 6 months later, on September 6, 2000, Sandri was promoted to substitute of the Secretariat of State, that is, Cardinal Sodano's right-hand man. The Legionaires of Christ did not fail to show their gratitude to Sandri. On the occasion of a lunch held in the atrium of the Paul VI Hall to honor the Cardinals, including Sandri, who were created at the November 24, 2007 consistory, I was bewildered when Sandri told me in advance that he was about to tell Pope Benedict XVI the following as the Pope entered the hall. Quote, Holy Father, you will excuse me if I don't stay for lunch, but I'm expected by 500 of my guests at the Legionaires of Christ. End quote. Francis, after having repeatedly and obsessively referred to an unspecified clericalism as the cause of sexual abuse crisis, in order to avoid denouncing the scourge of homosexuality, is now flaunting the most unscrupulous clericalism, an accusation he levels at others. He promotes Sandri to cardinal priest in May 2018 and a month later to cardinal bishop, so that he might confirm him as vice dean of the College of Cardinals, a candidate prepared by Francis to preside at the next conclave. The faithful have a right to know these sordid intrigues of a corrupt court. In the heart of the Church, we seem to glimpse the approaching shadow of Satan's synagogue. Carlo Maria Viganò, titular Archbishop of Ljubljana, Apostolic Nuncio.